After studying this module, you shall be able to gain an insight into the issue of higher education, to understand the structure and growth of higher education system in India, to identify the problems of financing higher education in India, to analyze the required public-private partnership in the higher education sector. Higher education, an important part of the education system, assists in creating human capital and technological capabilities for promoting the social and economic development of the society as a whole. Technological and institutional growth are two important components of the overall national economic development, which in turn depends upon the level of education in the country. Higher education plays a vital role in facilitating these changes by helping to integrate advanced training and research with dynamic economic realities. The UN International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights of 1966 declares in Article 13 that higher education shall be made equally accessible to all on the basis of capacity by every appropriate means, and particular by the introduction of free education. Presently, Indian higher education system is a large and complex body constituting different layers reflecting its structure in the country. One of the major concerns of the higher education system in India is the problem of its financing, which is due to education being in the concurrent list. The public expenditure on education is an indicator of the government's commitment to education, which is shown through a commonly used indicator, namely the share of GDP spent on education. The expenditure on education as a share of GDP has increased in India from 0.64% in 1950-52 to 3.85% in 2010. Despite this impressive growth, the share is less as compared to other large countries where it is around 6%. The issues of financing of education are gaining momentum because of dwindling resource base on the one hand and increasing financial needs of the educational sector on the other. In the present context, the major focus should be on the structural pattern and the problem of financing of higher education in India. Higher education conceptualization. Higher education refers to the stage of learning that occurs at universities, academies, colleges, seminar and institutes of technology, medicine, law, design, management. It also covers certain collegiate level institutions such as vocational schools, career colleges that award academic degrees or professional certificates. This is in the article by Kumar and Kumar in 2014. In other words, higher education in India refers to the education obtained after completing 12 years of schooling or equivalent and is of the duration of at least 9 months, which is full time, or after completing 10 years of schooling and is of the duration of at least 3 years. Benefits of higher education. Some of the favorable effects of higher education are enlisted here. It plays a vital role in the formation of human capital as it is an instrument for getting knowledge, skills, attitude and values for participation as a productive agent in the modern market economy based on technological progress achieved in recent times. It enhances the overall social, cultural, economic development of the society. For availing the benefits of better opportunities and enlargement of economic resources, access to quality higher education is a fundamental requirement. It also helps in promoting active citizenship and inculcates moral and ethical values. Structure of higher education in India. Higher education system which is prevailing presently in India is largely based on the British model. Before independence, it was a small system, but has undergone a massive expansion in the post-independence era. During this era, it was affected by the higher education system in the US, which had come to be recognized as the most powerful center of higher learning in the world. Ranked after China and the US, the higher education system of India is the third largest in the world. In order to generate and disseminate knowledge through providing easy access to higher education to common man, India has announced a national resolve to establish several universities, technical institutes, research institutes and professional and non-professional colleges all over the country. The institutional framework or structure of higher education in India is very complex. It includes several types of institutions, namely the first being universities. Under this, the universities are established by an act of parliament and they are known as central universities. If it is set by a state legislator, they are known as state universities. Deemed universities are institutions which have been accorded the status of university with authority to award their own degrees through the central government notification. Then we have institutes of national importance, which are prestigious institutions awarded the said status by the parliament. Then we also have institutions established by state legislative acts. We also have colleges affiliated with the university. These are both government aided and unaided. Then we have regulatory authorities, accreditation institutions, and the University Grants Commission. Central University. Central universities are established through an act of parliament and are funded by the union government. The state government maintain and control the functioning of the central universities located within their jurisdiction in many respects. Although it is a central agency, the UGC provides bulk funding for their development purpose. Table 1 depicts that the number of central universities in the country has increased from 18 in 2002 to 44 in 2012. That is the number they have increased. If we look at state universities, they have increased from 178 in 2002 to 306 in 2012. Institutions deemed to be universities were 52 in 2002 and has increased to 129 in 2012. Institutions of national importance was 17 in 2002, 67 in 2012. Private universities were 6 in 2002 and have moved up to 154 in 2012. So what we have is, if we take all this in totality, we have 271 in 2002 and in 2012 it has gone up to 700. State university, university established under the state legislature is known as state university. State universities receive funds from respective state governments, sometimes from the central government through the UGC. Their number in a state depends on the size of population and the available amount of resources in that state. Usually state universities have colleges affiliated with them. Colleges are engaged in providing education on undergraduate courses, whereas university provide education generally for postgraduate and doctoral programs. At present, the number of state universities has increased from 178 in 2002 to 306 in 2012. Deemed universities or deemed to be a university. This type of university is of a unique nature in India. In India before independence, a number of private autonomous institutions of higher education were developed, but these were not recognized properly under the British regime. So in 1948, on the recommendations of the Education Commission headed by Dr. Radhakrishnan, these institutions were recognized and the Government of India made a provision under the UGC Act of 1956 section 3 to recognize some of these institutions to be deemed university. The objective of this recognition was based on the premise that if institutions which for historical or other reasons were not universities yet were doing work of a high standard in specialized academic fields comparable to that done at the university, then the granting to these institutions the status of university would enable them to further contribute to the cause of higher education, thereby mutually enriching the institution and the university system. To qualify as a deemed university, it was required that the institution should generally be engaged in teaching programs and conducting research in chosen fields of specialization which were innovative and of very high academic standards at the master's and research levels. The UGC is the body that gives deemed to be a university status to an institution. Upon receiving an application, the UGC committee studies it and if convinced of its meeting all the stated requirements and benchmark, forwards its recommendation to the Department of Higher Education MHRD, which declares a university to be deemed to be a university. Both government and private universities can be deemed university. Table shows that the number of deemed universities has increased from 52 in 2002 to 129 in 2012. Institutes of national importance. Institutes of national importance, though not universities in the legal sense of the word, are acknowledged to have strategic and economic importance for the country and are accorded the power to grant degrees. These institutes are autonomous bodies and are not under the control of the UGC. These institutions have different funding structures and can develop and maintain their own curricula, academic calendar and compensation system for the faculty. Admission to these institutions is usually highly competitive. All the IITs, which is the Indian Institutes of Technology, AIIMS institution, that is All India Institute of Medical Sciences, NITs, National Institute of Technology, are characterized in this group. These institutes have been established at both the center and the state level. Their number has shown immense growth, that is from 17 in 2002 to 67 in 2012. Institutions established by state legislative act or the private universities. Private universities are established through an act of state legislature. Private universities are also required to obtain recognition from UGC. One bill, namely the Private Universities Establishment and Regulation Bill, was introduced in the Parliament in 1995 for regulating the entry and functionality of private universities. But due to strong opposition by the state government, the bill was withdrawn by the central government in 2007. The number of private universities has increased tremendously in the last decade, and their number increased from 6 in 2002 to 154 in 2012. Colleges affiliated with the university. Colleges can be affiliated to either the central or state universities. Private colleges are usually affiliated to state universities, as it appears that affiliation requires regulatory requirements are made easier under state universities. Colleges have to follow the entry, operation and exit requirements defined by the university. A chosen few of the colleges in the country have been given the status of autonomous colleges and have autonomy with respect to curriculum, examination and admission process. Since such colleges are not allowed to grant degrees, they are affiliated to a government university which grants the degree. Usually, colleges of repute are granted autonomy to manage their own affairs. Most of the older and established colleges are autonomous in nature, and some are financed either by the central or state government. It can be observed that the number of colleges in 2004 was 17,000, and this number has started increasing in 2009, growing from 26,000 to 35,500 in 2012. This trend reflects the increase in the demand for higher education on one hand and the entry of the private sector in the higher education on the other. Regulatory authorities. The statutory bodies that govern higher education are also known as professional council. There are 15 professional councils or regulatory bodies like the Medical Council of India or the MCI, All India Council for Technical Education AICTE, Bar Council of India BCI, etc., to name a few, which regulate the professional courses in medicine, engineering, management, law and such disciplines run by colleges and universities. Accreditation institutions. UGC regulation of 2012 mandated that all higher educational institutions be accredited by an accreditation agency. There are two main accrediting institutions, namely the National Board of Accreditation, which is NBA, established by the AICTE, and the National Assessment and Accreditation Council, which is NAAC, established by the UGC. NBA was set up in 1994 to periodically conduct an evaluation of technical institutions or programs on the basis of guidelines, norms and standards specified by it, and to make recommendations to it. AICTE or to the council or to the commission or to other bodies regarding recognition or de-recognition of the institution or program. The NAC, which is the National Assessment and Accreditation Council, is an autonomous body established by the University Grants Commission, the UGC of India, in 1994 to assess, accredit institutions of higher education in the country. It is an outcome of the recommendations of the National Policy in Education that laid special emphasis on upholding the quality of higher education in India. NAC proposes to introduce the India Education Index, which is the IEI for ranking institutes based on academic, research performance and other parameters. The outcome will help in the international comparison of institutes. We then have the University Grants Commission, which is the UGC. The main governing body in the higher education system of India, which is at the apex level, is the UGC. It is a statutory organization established by an Act of Parliament in 1956 for the promotion and coordination of university education and for the determination of teaching, examination, research and extension in universities and maintenance of their standards. Besides approving grants to universities and colleges, the Commission also advises the Centre and the state government on the measures necessary for the development of higher education. Its head office is in New Delhi and it has 6 regional offices which are located in Hyderabad, Bangalore, Guwahati, Kolkata, Bhopal and Pune. Growth of institutional capacity in higher education system of India. Under this we have the gross enrollment ratio or the GER. The gross enrollment ratio, the GER, is the indicator of the overall coverage of an educational system in relation to the population eligible for participation in the system. The United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, describes gross enrollment ratio as the total enrollment within a country in a specific level of education regardless of age, expressed as a percentage of the population in the official age group corresponding to this level of education. The GER for higher education in India has increased over the passage of time, and the values of GER in recent times are shown in this table below. According to the UGC annual report of 2014-15, the GER in the higher education was 19.4%, comprising 20.8 for males and 17.9 for females in 2010-11. For the year 2012-13, the GER for males was 22.3%, while for females it was 19.8%, averaging to 21.1% as a whole for the country. It can be noted from the table that GER for male population is marginally higher than for females, which clearly indicates that women are also pursuing higher education in good numbers. This can be seen as posing a challenge to the traditional male-dominated society in many parts of the country and is overall a very healthy sign for the Indian economy. Growth of institutional capacity of higher education in India. The higher education system has witnessed a remarkable increase in its institutional capacity over time. The growth of higher education can be traced from the capacity indicators such as number of university, level of institution, number of colleges, number of teachers, number of students enrolled in this institution. All this has been put in the table below. It is depicted in the table that in 2004, the country had 320 university level institutions, which increased by more than double in 2012. The number of colleges has also shown an increase of more than a double. Their numbers has gone up from 16,885 in 2004 to 35,500 in 2012. The number of teachers available in these institutions has remarkably gone up to 821,000 in 2010, whereas corresponding to this the number of students has shown a fluctuating trend in 2004. The number enrolled in them was 9.95 million, and this increased up to 25.9 million in 11 before declining by 5.9 million in 2012. We come next to the financing of higher education and its problem in India. Investment in education plays a vital role in generating human capital of the nation. The basic feature of education is that it is regarded as a public good, as a merit good, as a basic need and as a human of fundamental rights, thereby necessitating the need of investment in it by the government. The socio-economic conditions featured by insufficient public resources and diversification of channels of funds, including from external and non-governmental sources, issues related to educating financing become extremely important, as the methods and levels of financing of education have serious implication for not only the quantity, quality, equity and efficiency of the higher education system, but also for the socio-economic development of the country, including economic growth, poverty and income distribution. In India, issues related to financing of higher education are gaining attention because of the dwindling resource base on the one side and increasing financial need of the education system or the sector on the other. At every level, the demand for education is increasing rapidly day by day, but to maintain that level of education, funds are not increasing accordingly, due to which the gap between them is widening. Higher education in India is basically funded by the center and the state government, but the issue of concern is that the central government funding to higher education is lopsided and limited. The central government's main funding agency is the apex institution of higher education system, that is UGC. All the technical institutions are funded by the central government, while rest all are funded by the UGC. The main problem that arises with funding is that the majority of higher education institutions are not eligible for the central government's funds, and those who do get some funds find the amounts to be very small. The share of GDP spent on education, the most important and superior indicator of national efforts on the development of education in the nation, is the share of GDP spent on the education sector. It highlights the relative importance and priority given to the education sector in the national economy. The share of GDP spent on education is shown in table 5, which is the table below, and it can be observed from there that a very small share of GDP was spent on education in 1950s, that is less than 1%. The public expenditure as a percentage of GDP increased gradually up to 3.85% only in 6 decades, indicating the inadequate allocation of resources towards the education sector. The share of GDP spent on education has shown a remarkable rise after the economic reforms of 80s and 90s, with 2000-2001 marking a watershed year when 4.28% of GDP was allocated to education, though it fell to 3.85 in 2009-10. Further, the share of public expenditure on education by different levels is shown in table 6 for the year 2009 and 10. Now, what we find here is that the elementary education in India accounts for a major share of the total expenditure spent on education. This is so because the focus is on providing elementary education to all. This is also one of the Millennium Development Goals of the UN, to which India has committed. The share of the state government is more as compared to the central government on elementary education. That is, the state government collectively spends 1.25% of GDP, whereas the central government spends less than 0.5%. As a concern is with the university and higher education, it accounts for a smaller share in GDP, that is 0.91% only, of which 0.56% is spent on the state and 0.34% by central government, whereas adult and technical education together accounts for only 0.35% of total GDP share allocated to the education sector. Problem of financing higher education in India. The debate on financing of higher education is sound fundamentally because education is regarded as a quasi-public good. It is quasi-public good in the sense that on the one hand, as a public good, it affects society through human capital formation and knowledge at a large scale. On the other hand, in the private good form, it facilitates the platform for the individuals to have regular source of income for themselves through their skills and ability. This distinction in the public and private aspects of education led to the policy makers and development practitioners to have different views on financing of higher education. Initially, higher education was financed both by the state and the center government, but from the last decade, the central government has curtailed its spending on education sector, resulting considerable investment gaps emerging, which have serious implications such as hike in the tuition fees per student, number of self-financing institutions is increasing which charge fees on the full cost recovery principle, imbalance in the fee structure of private and public education institutions. Since the credit for higher education is given only to the middle or high income group families, it will pull the opportunities from the poor section of availing the benefits of higher education and thus creating inequalities. Major problems that our higher education system is facing is the lack of sufficient amount of funds on the part of the government. Traditional sources on which higher education has been dependent for its funding are state grants, tuition and other fees, endowments, college and universities' own contribution. Last two sources are now dried up, whereas privatization of higher education is not an appropriate solution for its funding problem because corporate sector is not concerned with the falling quality of higher education. If we explore the other channels for funding, then it is the state and private investment and education loans. National Commission on Education, that is the Qatari Commission in 1964-66, recommended the target of spending 6% of GDP on education within the time period of 1966 to 86. Since the Indian economy grew at the rate of 3.5% during 50 to 80, it was difficult to achieve this target due to a resource crunch. But even after breaking this so-called Hindu growth rate, Indian economy failed to allocate 6% of GDP to education sector. At present, the share of GDP spent on education is 3.85%, of which higher education accounts for only 0.91%. The other channel of funding the higher education is privatization. The private players entered into higher education in 1980s. Education from the private institution is costlier than the government institute. In professional courses, around 80% institution and enrollment of students are in the private sector. Thereby, one can say that private sector is growing speedily in the higher education sector in India. The issues with privatization of education are such as that these institutions are more profit oriented, thus less focusing on the quality of education given. Economically backward class can't afford to avail the benefit of higher education, and problem of informalization of staff employed in these institutions. Education loans are provided by public as well as private sector banks on the basis of collateral, thus clearly demarcating the line for poor families. The amount of education loans in India is very low because high rate of interest charged, collateral required, lack of quality services, etc. At present, MHRD and the Government of India has approved education loan scheme for economically backward students on easy terms. These are the major reasons that demand the government expenditure in higher education. In short, the dominance of private sector in education will worsen the financing of higher education. But at the same time, increases in public expenditure on education means diverting and channelizing resources through increase in the taxation, which further creates burden on society. Therefore, balanced public-private partnership is required for higher education in India. Higher education is an important part of the education system. It assists in creating human capital and technological capabilities for promoting the social and economic development of a society as a whole. Higher education refers to the stage of learning that occurs at universities, academies, colleges, seminar and institutes of technology. After China and the US, higher education system of India is the third largest in the world. The institutional framework structure of higher education in India is very complex, consisting of universities, colleges, institutes of national importance, institutes established by state legislative act, regulatory and accreditation authorities, etc. The main governing body in the higher education system of India is at the apex level is the UGC or the University Grants Commission. Gross enrollment ratio is increasing in India with the passage of time. It is 21.1% at present. Higher education in India is basically funded by the center and the state government. The share of public expenditure spent on education is around 4% in India, which is less as compared to any other country. This led to the dominance of private sector in education sector and hence making the higher education a costly phenomena. There is a need of balanced public-private partnership in higher education sector for spreading the benefits to the economically backward classes too.